Today we are going to talk about how we add and subtract linear expressions. So far we've looked at combining like terms, but we haven't looked in detail at what to do if we have a subtraction sign before our parentheses. So our steps that we're going to take today is that we're going to change subtraction to addition by adding the opposite that is, change the sign of each term that is being subtracted. And then once we do that, we're going to combine like terms. So we've talked about so far, any time that we have an expression that has parentheses in it, we have to think about if those parentheses affect the final answer. So looking at this first problem, we have 3x plus 6 in parentheses, minus, in parentheses, negative 2x minus 5. Now, if I look at my first set of parentheses, there's nothing that I'm multiplying by those parentheses, so I can just go ahead and get rid of them. However, if I look at my second set of parentheses, I have a negative sign before it. And just as if that was a number, I have to distribute that to every term inside the second set of parentheses. Now, when I distribute a negative, or a minus sign, that changes everything in my second set of parentheses to their opposites. So where I have negative 2x, that negative makes that a positive, so we write it as 2x plus 2x. And then I have a minus 5, which again we treat like negative 5. So when I take my minus sign and distribute it to the second set, or my second term, that also is going to make it positive. So I changed both the signs in the second set of parentheses to their opposites. So I get plus 2x plus 5. And now once I have that done, just like we see up here, we can combine like terms. So I see that I have 3x and 2x in common. And then I also have a plus 6 and a plus 5 that are in common. So let's start off with the x's. 3x plus 2x gives me 5x. 6 plus 5 gives me 11. So I get 5x plus 11. It was a positive 11, so it's going to be plus 11. So let's try another example. We have negative 5 minus, in parentheses, 2x minus 4. So I see with my first term I don't have any parentheses, so I can just leave that as is. But then I see that I have that minus sign before my second set of parentheses. So I have to distribute that to both terms inside my parentheses. Now the first term I have inside the parentheses is positive 2x, so that minus sign makes the number its opposite, so now it's going to be negative 2x, or like we talked about, negative 2x is the same as subtracting 2x. And then the opposite of negative 4 gives me positive 4, so I'm going to write that as plus 4. Now that I've gotten rid of parentheses, I can combine like terms, so I have negative 5x, negative 2x, and then that plus 4 is all by itself. Negative 5x plus negative 2x gives me negative 7x. And then plus 4 just stays as plus 4. So I get negative 7x plus 4. So we're going to try some examples at the bottom. So my first example that I see is 5x minus 2 minus, in parentheses, 3x plus 4. Now looking at this first set of parentheses, there's nothing before it that I'm distributing, so I can just get rid of those parentheses and write that as 5x minus 2. But the second set, I have to distribute the negative 2. So the opposite of 3x is going to be negative 3x, so I write minus 3x for that term. And the opposite of positive 4 is going to be negative 4. So again, I write minus 4. My like terms are 5x and negative 3x, and then negative 2 and negative 4. 5x and negative 3x together give me 2x, positive 2x. Negative 2 and negative 4 together give me negative 6. And remember that I write that as minus 6. So my simplified expression is 2x minus 6. Okay, looking at our next example, number 2, we see that there is no parentheses around that 2, so that just stays as 2, but then I have this negative that I have to distribute to both 3x and to 4. So the opposite of 3x is negative 3x, so I'm going to write that as minus 3x. The opposite of 4 gives me negative 4, so I'm going to write that as minus 4. And then I see that I have like terms 2 and negative 4. Negative 3x is all by itself. So when I go to write my answer, negative 3x is going to be my first term because it has the variable in it. And then 2 plus negative 4 gives me negative 2. So I put minus 2. So my answer is negative 3x minus 2. Okay, so let's look at the next one. Now the next one is a little bit different than some of the other examples that we've seen because we have a negative sign before the first set of parentheses. But just as if I had a minus sign, I have to distribute that negative. So that makes both the terms inside the first set of the parentheses are opposite. So opposite of 13x is negative 13x. Opposite of 1 is negative 1, so that's going to be minus 1. And then when I look at my next set of parentheses, I just have a plus sign before those parentheses. So plus signs don't really affect the answer at all. I can just write the terms as is inside the plus and the x minus 6. Now looking for like terms, I have negative 13x and I have positive 2x plus 2x in common, and then I have negative 1 and negative 6 that are like terms. So 13x plus negative 2x is going to give me negative 11x. Negative 1 and negative 6 is going to give me negative 7. So I write that as minus 7. So my answer is negative 11x minus 7. Now the next one's a little bit more complex because we've got a lot going on. But again, we want to start by looking at our parentheses. So starting out, 4x and 4, those are just going to stay as is in the problem. And then when I look at my next set of parentheses, I do see that I have a minus sign before it, which tells me that I have to make both of those terms their opposites. So positive 9 becomes negative 9, so I write that as minus 9. Minus 2x, which is negative 2x, becomes its opposite, which is positive 2x, so plus 2x. And then at the end of the parentheses, remember that that isn't times negative 6, that just means minus 6. If it's not in parentheses itself, that's just subtraction. So I'm going to write that as minus 6. And then just like the other ones, look for your like terms. We have 4x and then a positive x in common. No other terms with an x in them. All the rest of them are normal numbers, so all three of those are going to be like terms. Let's start with the x's. 4x and 2x is going to give me 6x. 4 plus negative 9 gives me negative 5. Plus negative 6 will give me negative 11. So I write my second term as minus 11. So we have 4 more that we're going to try. The next one, 2x minus 8 minus, in parentheses, negative 3x plus 1. So my first set of parentheses, nothing on the outside, so I can just write that as is. Now my second set of parentheses, I have that negative to distribute. So the opposite of negative 3x is x. The opposite of positive 1 is negative 1, so I write that as minus 1. 2x plus 3x is going to give me 5x. And then I have a negative 8 and a negative 1 in common. That is minus 9. Number 6. Number 6, my first set of parentheses, just like the last one, nothing to distribute, so I write that as negative 12x plus 8. But then my second set of parentheses, I do have that subtraction sign before it, which means that I have to distribute the negative to make both of those terms their opposite. 2x is negative 2x. The opposite of that minus 8, which we treat like a negative 8, is going to be positive 8, so I write that as plus 8. And then I look for my like terms. I have negative 12x and negative 2x, and then I have positive 8 and positive 8. Negative 12x and negative 2x together give me negative 14x. And then 8 and 8 give me positive 16. So before that, I'm going to put a plus sign. So I get negative 14x plus 16. Now 2 last examples, they have a little bit more going on than the first 6. Because I don't just have negatives to distribute, I also have numbers. So looking at number 7, I see that my first set of parentheses, I have a 5 to distribute to both of my terms. 5 times negative 5x is going to give me negative 25x. 5 times positive 7 gives me positive 35, so plus 35. And then we move on to our second set of parentheses. Now, something to notice here is that I'm subtracting 2 times what's in the parentheses. So that means that I need to distribute that entire quantity, negative 2, to both of my terms inside the second set. So negative 2 times 3x is going to give me negative 6x, so I write that as minus 6x. Negative 2 times 4 gives me negative 8, so I'm going to write that as minus 8. And I'm finished with that second set of parentheses. Now the last one, if we look at it, we just have a plus sign, and plus signs don't affect our signs at all. And there's no number, so I can go ahead and get rid of my third set of parentheses and make that just 2x plus 1. And now we need to look for like terms. So I see that I have a negative 25x, and my other terms with x in it, I have negative 6x. I also have positive 2x. So let's add those up. Negative 25x and negative 6x will give me negative 31x. And then plus positive 2x is going to give me negative 29x. And then I have my normal numbers. I have 35, negative 8, and 1. 35 plus negative 8 gives me 27, plus 1 will give me 28, and that's a positive 28, so that means I need a plus sign before my term. So I get negative 29x plus 28. One last problem. The very last one, we have 15x minus 3 times, in parentheses, negative 2x plus 1. Now my first term, no parentheses around it, so it stays as is. But if we look at this, we have that minus 3 before our set of parentheses. So just like what we saw in the last example with that negative 2, that means that that amount, negative 3, has to be distributed to both our terms. We have to account for the negative and for the 3. Negative 3 times negative 2x gives me positive 6x. Negative 3 times 1 gives me negative 3, so I write that as minus 3. And then the only like terms that I have here are 15x and then the plus 6x, positive 6x. Negative 3 is by itself. 15x plus 6x gives me 21x. And then negative 3 just stays in my answer as minus 3. So I get 21x minus 3 as my answer. Now, a couple things to keep in mind when we did these problems is that we always looked for if we were adding or subtracting before our sets of parentheses. And that subtraction sign before told me that I had to distribute a negative. If it was just a plus sign, like what we saw over here, I didn't have anything, it didn't affect my answer, so I could just get rid of my parentheses. Another thing that we always looked for were numbers that we were distributing to our parentheses. So make sure that you're looking for those first before, and you're distributing before you combine like terms.